You see this carved stone cross planted in the grass here in front of Washington Catholic High School, my old alma mater? Well, it's hard to believe that until the 1960s, that cross was all the way up there. People were afraid it was going to fall off. So they took it down from the top of the building, and I don't know what they were going to do with it, but some of my fellow students and I convinced the school to put it in the ground right here. And it's become kind of a landmark, something for me to go back home to. I went through the school and found it in better shape than when I was in class and graduated in 1965. And I was thrilled that they asked me to address the students from this high school and the nearby grade school. And it was a thrill to address the students, kind of spooky to be back in the gym where we had had all those basketball games. And all the students looked so young. Weren't we older when we went here? Thank you. I used to hate it when people my age would come to the high school and talk, because the old people always gave me the impression as a student that they knew everything. And that's not fair. I must tell you that a couple of years out of school, a very wealthy man in this town named Flavian Myers, who was a banker, called me up and he said, "You work at the radio station." I said, "Yes." "So do you have a tape recorder?" "Yeah, I got a tape recorder." "You have a microphone?" "Yeah, I got a microphone." He said, "I want you to record this gathering we're having. So I show up at the golf course and there are a bunch of really old people there. And I heard this one guy saying, "You know where you're going to be buried yet?" I thought, my God, you know, these people are 2 weeks away from death. And I asked Mr. Myers, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "It's my 50th class reunion." Well, I'm back for mine. And I'm suddenly picturing all these old people, and I'm afraid I'm going to go to the reunion Saturday and hear somebody say, "Do you know where you're going to be buried?" Because you can't let yourself get old. I cheat. My hair went white at age 30. And I said at that time, I'm going to dye my hair till I'm 40. And then I said 50. And then I said 60. And then I said 70. And that's a little too loud, because I have a loud voice anyway. Anyway, I want to thank you all and give you a little lesson that I want you to remember on graduation night. I want one person from each class to volunteer and come up here. And don't fight over it. I want you to line up right here with 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way up to senior in high school. We got to do this in order. Now I'm going to give you a sign, but I don't want you to show it to the audience yet. Okay, are you class of 22? Yeah. Okay, hold on to that. 7th grade? My God, I'm taller than you are. 8th? My God, you're taller than I am. 9th? 10? 11? 12. Now don't show them to the audience yet. All right. 6th grade, show them to the audience. What's it say? 2,452. That's the number of days he has before he graduates from high school. How about 7th grade? Shout it out. What is it? 2,087. You keep that up, they'll add a year. Next grade, 8th.
I know that guy.
Freshman. You've got 1,357 days stuck here. Remember that. Sophomore, 992. Junior, 6 what? And senior? Now, I'm going to give you some envelopes, and I want you just do the work on your own. Come here. I want you to take these back into the stands. Just here, take a bunch of them and pass them out just randomly. There's not going to be enough. Now, I do not want you to open these envelopes. Okay, I just want you to randomly hold on to these envelopes, and we're going to talk about them after a while. All right, let me get serious for a minute and tell you something. We're okay. No one pays attention to me back home, so why should they hear? Coming back to this city, there are only 3 things in this town that I have really warm feelings about. My mother and my father and this building. My mother and father are long dead, so the only thing I have back here in Washington, Indiana that gives me really good feelings is a place I hated being in for 4 years. And the point I want to make to you is when you graduate from high school in how many days? 10,000 days, whenever it is? Somebody will get up and they'll make this wonderful speech about how your whole life is ahead of you. That this wonderfully magnificent life is ahead of you. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. The best years of your life are between now and when you graduate. Because after you graduate, things are going to get very different. You'll have different responsibilities. You may get married. You may find a partner. You may be single all your life. But you'll have to pay your own medical expenses. Your car's going to get towed. You'll get speeding tickets. You'll have to pay taxes. And you'll end up going to an awful lot of funerals. When you get to be my age and somebody says, when is the best part of your life? It is when you were in high school and grade school. Particularly in a nice place like this. You don't know how lucky you are to be in a building this nice, paid for not by tax money, but by your parents and some very generous people. This school looks better than it did 50 years ago. And you drive around this city and you can't find a lot of things that look better now than they used to look. For example, you can't find St. Mary's Church anymore, and that tore me up when I saw that empty lot over there. It was here, in this place, that I learned that I had a little worth, that I was selected to do things. It was in this building that we were told that John Kennedy had been shot. I was a sophomore at the time. It was a horribly lousy, rotten, rainy Friday. And we lost our Catholic president that day. We had a homecoming in this gym right after they installed these new lights. And the junior varsity game, the B team game, went into 4 overtimes. By the time the varsity game started and we had halftime, we turned out all the lights to crown the homecoming queen. We had rented a spotlight, and I sang. And then we turned the lights back on, not knowing they had to warm up. By the time the kids from New Albany got out of here, it was 11:15, and they had a 2.5-hour drive ahead of them to get back home. And it was raining. I never will forget that night. It was horrible. We had a magician who came here and did a show, and he put a little elephant in a cage, and they hung it from that rafter, and he shot a gun, and the elephant disappeared. I guess there were Venetian blinds that turned, and we were amazed until we heard the elephant fall inside the cage, and the cage started doing that. I was indeed a cheerleader. That was 50 years and 40 pounds ago. That was back when I still had hair. And if anyone doubts I was a cheerleader, this has been hanging in my closet for 50 years. It shrank. I don't think I could get my arm in there. By the way, this was the first year that we changed the school song to Cheer for the Red, White, Black of Washington. We used to sing Cheer for the Red and White. And our teacher advisor, Fred Walker, whom you did not want to make angry, looked up school records and found out that we should have black in there. We had a wonderful band director, Walt Anslinger, who told us we could be better than we thought we could be. He had us do very tough music, and we played 2 concerts at a high school in Evansville. And I sang with the dance band. I wore a white blazer, and I was very thin. And I came out, and I remember in the middle of one of the songs, a girl went, "Ah." To this day, I don't know whether she was in pain or she liked what I was singing, but it was a big thrill. We played the Washington Hatchets every year, and by God, one year we won. And our pastor, Father Lautner, back when this was St. Simon's, went over to the church at 10:30 at night and rang the church bell. And people started calling up asking if the Pope had died. We had a nun. Remember nuns? I was lucky. You have wonderful lay teachers. We had nice nuns. I am sick and tired of people saying that nuns slapped your hand with a ruler. They didn't. They looked at you and went, "Don't." And you didn't. We had a nun that was so ditzy that even her fellow nuns called her amoeba. You want that again? No, just think about it. But what you've got to do is to get involved. I am not bragging, but when I was in high school, in order to shut me up, they put me in organizations. Not only was I a cheerleader, when I was a senior, I was editor of the school newspaper, in the Glee Club, Columbian Squires, Explorer Scouts, Men's Choir, Red Cross. I put out the church bulletin, was in the theater and sang with the dance band, and worked at the radio station. That's why I was so thin. I didn't have time to eat anything. I have another memory of this place. Imagine I'm in 3rd grade. We're all herded into the gym, and there in the middle is Dr. Schaefer with a hypodermic needle about this big. And we all lined up, and they gave us a shot of polio vaccine. And if you don't understand the fear of getting polio, go on the internet and look it up. For 2 years, we couldn't go to the swimming pool because they weren't sure how it was spreading. A girl in my grade school class lived out her final days in an iron lung because she couldn't breathe. That's that big can that you lie in and only your head sticks out. So we got our shots, and then we were called back again, and we got a booster shot, and we got another booster shot, and we got another booster shot, but we didn't get polio. Thank you for being so attentive, but I must tell you one secret. No matter how hard you study, no matter how good you look, no matter how healthy you are, no matter how nice you are, you can have bad luck. And you've got to get used to the fact that not everybody is going to be lucky. Open your envelopes. We're going to see who's lucky and who's not. There's money, albeit not real money, in those envelopes. Has anybody got more than $1,000? You've got $1, a real dollar. I'll tell you what, you can keep that dollar or you can trade it for what's under my desk. What would you like to do? Okay, the smaller item or the bigger item? Okay. Do you play sports? Good. Now, does anyone else have a real dollar? You do. Who has a real? You do. Do you want what's in my desk, or do you want to keep the? By the way, you got to give me that dollar. Do you want to keep that dollar, or trade it for what's underneath here? Bring me the dollar, and I'm going to give you 13 donuts. also want to tell you very quickly, and I'll get ready to leave on this point. You have got to learn to talk. Your generation is electronic and it's very difficult for people in my generation to understand what the hell you're talking about. But that's because the internet and other things and texting have caused you to speak very quickly. So if you talk to somebody my age, slow down, because we don't know what in God's name you're saying. Now, if you're mumbling on purpose, so we can't understand what you're saying, that's one thing. But the more you travel, the more you will treasure the fact that you learned how to speak. I had a horrible Washington, Indiana accent when I lived here. My mom would say, "You want some fish?" I say, "Mom, it's fish." She said, "I'm saying fish." She'd say things like, "Don't push me into a bush, get me a cushion." When I went to Indiana University, the professors beat that out of us and said we had to speak correctly. So that is why I speak rather plastically today, because I emphasize things most people don't. All right, what do we got so far? You need to not worry about bad luck. You need to be proud of where you're from. You need to have at least one special friend in your life that you can tell your deepest, darkest secrets to. And if you don't, find a teacher you can. And if you're being bullied, for God's sakes, let somebody know about it. Because more people's schooling has been ruined by the fact that some person wants to make themselves look better by making you look worse. The bicentennial is coming up, and I want all of you to get involved in that, because in May of next year, I'm in charge of digging up the time capsule that's in the sidewalk at 2nd and Main. And if you go down to that corner where the little park is, and you happen to ask yourself, what's the big deal about 2nd and Main? That's where the city started. Right there, it was a forest and a field, and it became Washington, Indiana, particularly when the railroad came through. It is Davies County. It's not Davis County. Can you all say Davies? It's Davies County. And if you don't say Davies, I'm going to come back next year and beat you. And there's one final thing, and that was, have any of you heard of Hippocrates? Don't be afraid. Listen, I'll tell you something. Never be afraid about being smart. Hippocrates wrote an oath that all doctors have to take. It's called the Hippocratic Oath. And the first part of the Hippocratic Oath is not to heal people. It's not to hurt people. So it's not a bad thing to consider when you live your life. Don't hurt anybody. Don't make yourself better by making somebody else worse, and be proud you're going to this school, and it's nice to see all the red, and I should have worn red, and I apologize. And that's all I've got to say. You can go home now, I guess. Thank you.